Horse invades hospital and stops the euthanasia of a little girl. What happened next? The halls of Boston Memorial Hospital hummed with the usual late-night activity. Nurses shuffled between rooms, the steady beep of monitors providing a constant backdrop to the whispered conversations and muffled sobs that echoed through the sterile corridors. It was a night like any other until the impossible happened. Lisa Anderson, a seasoned nurse with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, was just finishing her rounds in the intensive care unit when she heard a commotion from the lobby. Frowning, she made her way towards the noise, her comfortable shoes squeaking against the polished floor. As she rounded the corner, Lisa froze, her eyes widening in disbelief. There, standing proudly in the middle of the hospital lobby, was a magnificent white horse. Its coat gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lights, and its mane flowed like spun silver. But it was the horse's eyes that caught Lisa's attention. They seemed to glow with an otherworldly intelligence. "What in the world?" Lisa breathed, watching as security guards approached the animal cautiously. The horse, if it could be called just a horse, seemed unperturbed by the chaos surrounding it. With purposeful steps, it began to move deeper into the hospital, heading straight for the ICU. Lisa found herself following, drawn by a force she couldn't explain. As they neared the ICU, she suddenly remembered her young patient, Emily Johnson. The 6-year-old girl had been brought in 3 days ago with a mysterious illness that had baffled even the most experienced doctors. Emily's condition had been deteriorating rapidly, and Lisa had just left her bedside, her heart heavy with the knowledge that the child might not make it through the night. As if reading her thoughts, the horse quickened its pace. Pushing past the swinging doors of the ICU with surprising gentleness, Lisa hurried after it, her heart pounding in her chest. Inside the ICU, Dr. Michael Chen was standing by Emily's bedside, his face a mask of frustration and sorrow. He looked up as the horse entered, his mouth dropping open in shock. "What the—" he began. But the words died on his lips as the majestic animal approached Emily's incubator. Lisa and Michael watched, transfixed, as the horse lowered its head, gently touching its muzzle to the glass of the incubator. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, Emily's monitors began to beep erratically. "She's crashing!" Michael yelled, snapping into action. But before he could reach for the crash cart, the monitors stabilized. Then, impossibly, Emily's vital signs began to improve. Color flooded back into the little girl's pale cheeks. Her breathing, which had been labored and irregular, evened out. And then, as Lisa and Michael watched in awe, Emily's eyes fluttered open. "Mommy," the child whispered, her voice weak but clear. Lisa felt tears spring to her eyes. "It's a miracle," she breathed, looking from Emily to the horse and back again. Michael shook his head, struggling to process what he had just witnessed. "This is impossible," he muttered. "Medically impossible." But the evidence was right before their eyes. Emily, the little girl they had all but given up for lost, was awake and improving by the second. And standing beside her, radiating an aura of calm and power, was the mysterious white horse. As the ICU erupted into a flurry of activity, with nurses and doctors rushing to check on Emily and verify her miraculous recovery, Lisa found herself drawn to the horse. She reached out a trembling hand, gently stroking its velvet nose. "Who are you?" she whispered. "What are you?" The horse's intelligent eyes seemed to bore into her soul, and for a moment Lisa felt as if she were on the brink of understanding something vast and ancient. But then the moment passed, leaving her with more questions than answers. Little did Lisa know that this was only the beginning. The arrival of this mysterious horse, soon to be known as Aura, would set in motion a chain of events that would challenge everything she thought she knew about life, death, and the bonds that connect us all. As the night wore on and Emily continued to improve, none of them could have predicted the trials and revelations that lay ahead. For in the room next door, another miracle was about to unfold, one that would intertwine the fates of everyone in Boston Memorial Hospital in ways they could never have imagined. While the miraculous recovery of Emily Johnson sent shockwaves through Boston Memorial Hospital, Another story was unfolding just a few doors down. In room 305 of the long-term care ward, John Johnson had lain motionless for weeks, trapped in the depths of a coma that even the most optimistic doctors had begun to fear he might never emerge from. John, a ruggedly handsome man in his early 40s, had been brought in after a severe riding accident. The details were fuzzy. He had been found unconscious at the base of a cliff, his prized horse nowhere to be seen. The doctors had done all they could, but as the days turned into weeks, hope had begun to fade. That is, until the night Aura arrived. As the commotion surrounding Emily's recovery began to die down, Nurse Lisa Anderson found herself drawn to John's room. She couldn't explain why, but something told her she needed to check on him. As she approached his bed, her eyes widened in disbelief. John's fingers were twitching. "Dr. Chen," Lisa called out, her voice trembling with excitement. "Come quick!" Michael Chen rushed into the room, his face still flushed from the excitement of Emily's recovery. "What is it?" he asked, breathless. "It's John," Lisa said, pointing to the man's hand. "He's moving." As they watched, John's eyelids began to flutter. Slowly, painfully, they opened, revealing confused blue eyes that darted around the room before finally focusing on Lisa and Michael. "Where am I?" John croaked, his voice hoarse from disuse. Michael leaned in, checking John's pupils and vitals. "You're in the hospital, Mr. Johnson. You've been in a coma for several weeks. Can you tell me the last thing you remember?" John's brow furrowed as he struggled to piece together his memories. "I was riding my horse, Aura. We were in the woods, and then—" He trailed off, shaking his head. "It's all a blur after that." Lisa and Michael exchanged a startled glance. "Aura?" Lisa repeated. "Your horse's name is Aura?" John nodded weakly. "Yes. Why? Is she okay? Did they find her?" Before either of them could respond, a commotion in the hallway drew their attention. Lisa stepped out to investigate and found herself face to face with the majestic white horse that had miraculously appeared earlier that night. "Oh my God," she breathed, realization dawning. "John, I think you have a visitor." With surprising gentleness for such a large animal, Aura made her way into John's room. The moment John laid eyes on her, his face lit up with recognition and relief. "Aura," he exclaimed, struggling to sit up. "You're here. You're okay." As Aura approached John's bedside, nuzzling his outstretched hand affectionately, Lisa and Michael stood back, watching in amazement. The connection between man and horse was palpable, filling the room with an almost electric energy. "I don't understand," Michael muttered, shaking his head. "First Emily, now John. It's like this horse is—" "Magic," Lisa finished for him, her voice barely above a whisper. John looked up at them, confusion clear on his face. "Emily, my daughter. What about Emily?" Lisa and Michael exchanged a look, realizing they had yet to inform John about his daughter's condition or her miraculous recovery. "Mr. Johnson," Michael began carefully, "your daughter was brought in a few days ago with a severe illness. We almost lost her tonight." John's face paled, his hand tightening in Aura's mane. "What do you mean, almost?" Lisa stepped forward, placing a comforting hand on John's arm. "Something incredible happened, Mr. Johnson. Your horse, Aura, she appeared in the hospital out of nowhere. She went straight to Emily's room and, well, there's no other way to say it. She healed her." John's eyes widened, a mix of emotions playing across his face, relief, joy, and something else, something that looked almost like fear. "It's happened again," he murmured, more to himself than to the others in the room. "What do you mean, again?" Michael pressed, his scientific curiosity piqued. John looked up at them, his blue eyes filled with a wisdom and weariness that seemed beyond his years. "Aura, she's special. She's been in my family for generations, always appearing when we need her most. But her gifts, they come at a price." As John's words hung in the air, a chill ran down Lisa's spine. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were standing on the precipice of something much larger and more mysterious than they could possibly imagine. Little did they know, the price John spoke of was already being paid. In another part of the ICU, alarms began to sound as a patient's condition suddenly and inexplicably began to deteriorate. The night was far from over, and the miracles brought by Aura's arrival were about to be balanced by unforeseen consequences that would test the limits of science, faith, and the very nature of life and death itself. As the first rays of dawn began to creep through the windows of Boston Memorial Hospital, the euphoria of the night's miraculous events gave way to a growing sense of unease. Lisa Anderson stood at the nurse's station, her fingers flying over the keyboard as she updated patient charts, her mind racing with questions she couldn't begin to answer. The soft clip-clop of hooves on linoleum made her look up. Aura, the mysterious white horse that had turned their world upside down, her skin taking on an ashen hue. "Code Blue!" Lisa shouted, her training kicking in as she began chest compressions. Dr. Michael Chen burst into the room moments later, taking in the scene with a mix of shock and growing suspicion. As they worked to stabilize Mrs. Abernathy, Michael's eyes kept darting to Aura, who stood calmly in the doorway, watching the proceedings with those unnervingly intelligent eyes. It took nearly an hour, but they finally managed to stabilize Mrs. Abernathy. As Lisa slumped against the wall, exhausted, Michael pulled her aside. "Lisa," he said in a low, urgent voice, "we need to talk. This can't be a coincidence." Lisa nodded, her face grave. Emily's recovery, John waking up, and now Mrs. Abernathy. She trailed off, the implications too disturbing to voice. "It's like a balance," Michael mused, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "For every life saved or improved, another seems to suffer. And it all centers around that horse." As if on cue, Aura turned her head towards them, her gaze seeming to pierce right through to their souls. Lisa shivered, unable to shake the feeling that the animal understood every word they were saying. "We need to talk to John," Lisa said firmly. "He said Aura has been in his family for generations. He must know more about whatever this is." Michael nodded in agreement, and together they made their way to John's room. They found him sitting up in bed, looking remarkably improved from just a few hours ago. His daughter, Emily, was curled up beside him, both of them stroking Aura's mane as the horse stood patiently by the bedside. The scene was so picturesque, so filled with love and warmth, that Lisa almost hated to disrupt it. But the image of Mrs. Abernathy's ashen face flashed in her mind, stealing her resolve. "Mr. Johnson," Michael began, his tone carefully neutral, "we need to ask you some questions about Aura." John's hand stilled on the horse's neck, his expression growing guarded. "What kind of questions?" Lisa stepped forward, her voice gentle but firm. "You mentioned last night that Aura's gifts come with a price. What did you mean by that?" John sighed deeply. Looking down at his daughter's sleeping face before meeting their eyes, "It's a long story," he said, "one that's been passed down through my family for generations. Aura, she's not just a horse, she's a guardian, a protector of our family. But her power, it's not creation, it's transfer." "Transfer?" Michael repeated, his brow furrowing. John nodded solemnly. "When Aura heals or saves one of us, that life force, that vitality, it has to come from somewhere, or someone." Lisa felt her blood run cold as the pieces began to fall into place. "Mrs. Abernathy," she whispered. "What?" John asked, alarmed. Michael quickly filled him in on what had happened, watching as John's face fell with each word. "I'm so sorry," John said, his voice thick with emotion. "I never wanted. I didn't think—" "You didn't think what?" Lisa pressed, a hint of anger creeping into her voice. "That your miracle horse would harm innocent people to save your family?" John flinched at her words, but before he could respond, a small voice piped up from the bed. "It's not Aura's fault," Emily said, her eyes wide and earnest. "She only wants to help. She loves us." The adults in the room fell silent, the weight of the situation hanging heavy in the air. Aura nickered softly, nuzzling Emily's hand as if in agreement. "What do we do now?" Lisa asked. looking from John to Michael and back again. Michael ran a hand over his face, the lines of exhaustion and moral conflict etched deeply. I don't know. Medically, ethically, this is uncharted territory. John looked at them pleadingly. You can't send her away. She saved my daughter's life, my life. She's family. But at what cost? Lisa countered, her voice soft but firm. How can we justify keeping her here if it means other patients might suffer? As they grappled with the impossible dilemma before them, none of them noticed the figure lurking just outside the door, listening intently to every word. Nurse Pamela Green, known for her ambition and less than scrupulous methods, felt a smile spreading across her face. This, she thought, could be the opportunity of a lifetime. A horse with the power to heal, to transfer life itself. The possibilities were endless and potentially very, very profitable. As Pamela slipped away, her mind already racing with plans, the group in John's room continued their heated discussion, unaware that their miraculous secret was about to become much more complicated and dangerous than they could have ever imagined. The stage was set for a battle not just of life and death, but of ethics, greed, and the very nature of miracles themselves. And at the center of it all stood Aura, silent and majestic, her true purpose still shrouded in mystery. As news of the miraculous recoveries began to spread through the hospital like wildfire, an undercurrent of tension and suspicion grew alongside it. Whispered conversations in corners and furtive glances followed Lisa and Michael wherever they went. The presence of a horse in the hospital was impossible to hide, and speculation ran rampant about its connection to the unexplainable events unfolding within the walls of Boston Memorial. Nurse Pamela Green wasted no time in setting her plans in motion. With a saccharine smile and a carefully crafted air of concern, she approached Dr. Arthur Blackwood, the hospital's ambitious chief of medicine. Dr. Blackwood, Pamela cooed, falling into step beside him as he strode down the corridor. I wonder if I might have a word with you about some unusual occurrences I've observed recently. Blackwood, a tall man with salt and pepper hair and a perpetual frown, glanced at her irritably. Make it quick, Green. I have a board meeting in 10 minutes. Pamela's smile widened. This was exactly the opening she needed. Well, sir, it's about the Johnson case and the unexplained recovery of several other patients. Dr. Blackwood's steps slowed. His interest peaked despite his busy schedule. Go on, he said, his voice low. Pamela leaned in conspiratorially. I've overheard some interesting conversations, sir. It seems that Dr. Chen and Nurse Anderson are involved in something quite extraordinary, something that could revolutionize medicine as we know it. As Pamela spun her tale, carefully omitting certain details and embellishing others, Dr. Blackwood's frown deepened. By the time she finished, he was practically vibrating with a mix of skepticism and poorly concealed excitement. This is preposterous, he muttered, but Pamela could see the gleam in his eyes. And yet, if there's even a shred of truth to it. Imagine the prestige for Boston Memorial, Pamela pressed, sensing victory. The funding, the accolades. We could be at the forefront of a medical breakthrough. Dr. Blackwood nodded slowly, his mind already racing with possibilities. I keep this to yourself for now, Green. I'll look into it personally. As Pamela watched him hurry off to his meeting, a smug smile played at her lips. The seeds of chaos had been planted. Now, she just had to wait for them to grow. Meanwhile, in the hospital cafeteria, Lisa and Michael huddled over cups of lukewarm coffee, their voices low and urgent. We can't keep this up, Michael, Lisa said, rubbing her temples. The other staff are starting to ask questions, and I can't shake this feeling that we're, I don't know, playing with forces we don't understand. Michael nodded, his usually confident demeanor shaken. I know. But what choice do we have? We took an oath to save lives, Lisa. If Aura can do that. But at what cost? Lisa interrupted, her voice sharp. Mrs. Abernathy is still in critical condition, and she's not the only one. 3 other patients have taken unexpected turns for the worse since Aura arrived. Before Michael could respond, They were interrupted by the arrival of John, wheeling himself over to their table. Despite his improved condition, worry lines creased his forehead. "We need to talk," he said without preamble. "About Aura, about all of this. There's more you need to know." Lisa and Michael exchanged glances, a sense of foreboding settling over them. "What is it, John?" Lisa asked gently. John took a deep breath, his hands fidgeting in his lap. "It's about the price I mentioned. It's not just other people who can be affected. The person Aura saves, they become bound to her in a way." Michael leaned forward, his scientific curiosity piqued despite his reservations. "Bound? How?" "It's hard to explain," John said, frustration evident in his voice. "It's like a piece of your life force becomes entwined with hers. You can feel her, sense her presence, and she can call on you when she needs you." Lisa's eyes widened in realization. "That's how you knew to wake up when Emily was in danger?" John nodded solemnly. "Yes, but it's more than that. The bond, it can be a blessing, but it can also be a curse. My great-grandfather, he was saved by Aura as a child, but as he grew older, the bond began to drain him. By the time he was in his 50s, he looked and felt like an old man." The implications of John's words hung heavy in the air. Lisa felt a chill run down her spine as she thought of little Emily, of the invisible threads now connecting her to the mysterious horse. "Why didn't you tell us this before?" Michael demanded, a hint of anger in his voice. "Would you have believed me?" John shot back. "Besides, I wasn't thinking clearly. Emily was dying. I would have done anything to save her." As the three of them sat in tense silence, grappling with the weight of this new information, they failed to notice Dr. Blackwood watching them intently from across the cafeteria, his eyes narrowed in calculation. The stage was set for a confrontation that would shake the very foundations of Boston Memorial Hospital. As Aura continued her silent vigil in the ICU, the lines between miracle and curse, between salvation and damnation, were beginning to blur. Little did they know. Forces beyond their understanding were converging, drawn by the presence of Aura and the power she represented. The true test was yet to come, and it would demand sacrifices none of them were prepared to make. As the day wore on, tension continued to build within the walls of Boston Memorial. Dr. Blackwood, armed with the information provided by Nurse Green, began his own discreet investigation. He pored over patient charts, noting the inexplicable recoveries and equally baffling declines. His skepticism warred with a growing sense of wonder and opportunity. Meanwhile, Lisa and Michael found themselves caught in an increasingly complex web of ethical dilemmas. They had sworn to do no harm. Yet with every life Aura saved, it seemed another was put at risk. The weight of their secret pressed down on them, straining their professional relationship and testing the bounds of their friendship. "Daddy," Emily said suddenly, her voice eerily calm, "Aura says more are coming." John's blood ran cold. "More what, sweetheart?" But before Emily could answer, a commotion erupted in the hallway. Lisa burst into the room, her face pale. "John, you need to see this," she said urgently. Wheeling himself to the window, John's jaw dropped at the sight before him. In the parking lot below, illuminated by the harsh glare of streetlights and the occasional flash of lightning, a small crowd had gathered. Men and women of all ages, some visibly ill or injured, stood facing the hospital. And in their midst, pawing at the ground and tossing their manes, were horses, at least a dozen of them. "What the hell?" John breathed. Lisa shook her head, her voice barely above a whisper. "They just started arriving about an hour ago. The horses. They look just like Aura, and the people. They're all asking for her by name." As if in response to Lisa's words, a collective whinny rose from the gathered horses, echoed by a soft nicker from Aura. Emily giggled, a sound that sent shivers down John's spine. "They're here to help," Emily said matter-of-factly. "Aura called them." Before anyone could respond to this bombshell, Dr. Blackwood strode into the room, flanked by 2 security guards and a smirking Nurse Green. "All right," he said, his voice sharp with authority. "I want to know exactly what's going on here, and I want to know now." The room fell silent, the only sound the steady beeping of monitors and the distant rumble of thunder. John and Lisa exchanged panicked glances, while Michael, who had just arrived, stepped protectively in front of Emily's bed. "Dr. Blackwood," Michael began, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "I can explain." But he was cut off by a sudden, blinding flash of lightning, followed immediately by a deafening crack of thunder. The lights flickered ominously, and for a moment, the entire hospital seemed to hold its breath. In that moment of darkness and confusion, Aura moved. With a grace that belied her size, she maneuvered around the stunned humans and out into the hallway. By the time the backup generators kicked in, restoring light to the hospital, she was already halfway to the main entrance. "Stop that horse!" Dr. Blackwood shouted, his composure finally cracking. What followed was a scene of utter chaos. Staff and patients alike pressed themselves against the walls as Aura galloped through the corridors, her hooves striking sparks from the linoleum. Security guards gave chase, but they might as well have been trying to catch the wind. As Aura burst through the main doors and into the storm-lashed night, a cheer went up from the crowd in the parking lot. The other horses reared up on their hind legs, trumpeting a welcome to their mysterious kin. Back in the ICU, Emily suddenly went rigid, her eyes rolling back in her head. "It's starting," she whispered, her voice somehow audible even over the commotion. "The gathering. The choice." John reached for his daughter, panic clawing at his throat. "Emily, Emily, what's happening?" But Emily didn't respond. Instead, her body began to glow with a soft, pulsing light, the same otherworldly radiance that seemed to emanate from Aura and her equine brethren. As the storm raged outside and confusion reigned within, the true nature of Aura's presence was about to be revealed. The line between science and magic, between the natural and the supernatural, was blurring beyond recognition. And in the eye of this impossible storm, the staff of Boston Memorial Hospital would be forced to confront their deepest beliefs about life, death, and the price of miracles. The night was far from over, and the greatest challenges and revelations were yet to come. The chaos that engulfed Boston Memorial Hospital showed no signs of abating. Rain lashed against the windows, driven by howling winds that seemed to carry whispers of another world. Inside, the corridors were a maze of confusion, with staff trying to maintain order while grappling with events far beyond their understanding. In Emily's room, the tension was palpable. Dr. Blackwood paced back and forth, his earlier authoritative demeanor crumbling in the face of the inexplicable. John sat by his daughter's bedside, clutching her glowing hand, his face a mask of fear and wonder. Lisa and Michael stood shoulder to shoulder, a united front against the storm of questions and accusations. "Someone had better start explaining," Dr. Blackwood growled, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "And I mean now." Michael stepped forward, his voice calm despite the turmoil in his heart. "Dr. Blackwood, what we're dealing with here, it goes beyond conventional medicine, beyond science as we know it." As Michael began to recount the events of the past few days, from Emily's miraculous recovery to the appearance of Aura and the strange transference of life force, Lisa found her attention drawn to Emily. The young girl's eyes were open now, but unfocused, seeing something beyond the confines of the hospital room. "Emily," Lisa said softly, kneeling by the bed. "Can you hear me? What do you see?" Emily's voice, when she spoke, seemed to come from far away. "I see everything. The web of life, connecting us all. And Aura. She's at the center of it." John squeezed his daughter's hand. "What does that mean, sweetheart? What is Aura?" A small smile played at Emily's lips. "She's a guardian, a conduit. She and the others like her. They maintain the balance." Dr. Blackwood scoffed, but there was a tremor in his voice. "Balance? What balance?" "Between life and death," Emily replied simply. "Between this world and
the other side." As if in response to Emily's words, a hush fell over the room outside, seemed to pause the very air, holding its breath, and then carried on a gust of wind came the sound of hoofbeats. Lisa rushed to the window, gasping at the sight that greeted her. Aura by a circle of glowing horses. As Lisa watched, each horse approached a person from the gathered crowd,
touching their muzzle to the individual's forehead. With each touch, a spark of light seemed to pass between horse and human. "My God," Michael breathed, joining Lisa at the window. "It's like they're healing them." Emily's voice drifted from the bed, dreamy and distant. "Not healing, choosing, the worthy ones, the ones who will help maintain the balance." Dr. Blackwood pushed his way to the window, his skepticism warring with the evidence of his own eyes. "This is impossible. It defies every law of nature, of science." "Perhaps," John said quietly, "we don't know as much about those laws as we thought we did." As they watched, transfixed, Aura raised her head and let out a whinny that seemed to shake the very foundations of the hospital. In response, every piece of medical equipment in the building, every monitor, every life support machine, flickered to life, their displays showing not vital signs, but a complex, swirling pattern of light. Nurse Green, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly gasped. "The patient in room 301, the one we thought wouldn't make it through the night, he's sitting up, talking." Similar reports began to flood in from all over the hospital. Patients in critical condition were improving rapidly, while others, seemingly stable, took sudden turns for the worse. It was as if the entire hospital had become a massive living organism, with Aura as its beating heart. "The balance," Emily murmured. "It must be maintained." Dr. Blackwood slumped against the wall, his worldview crumbling around him. "How? How is this possible?" It was Lisa who answered, a look of dawning comprehension on her face. "Don't you see, all this time we've been looking at it wrong? Aura, the other horses, they're not causing these changes. They're responding to them, guiding them." Michael nodded slowly, the pieces falling into place, like white blood cells in the body of the world, rushing to where they're needed most, healing what they can, allowing what must pass to do so. "But why here?" John asked. "Why now?" Emily's glow began to fade, her eyes focusing once more on the room around her. Because the balance was disrupted. Too much death, too much loss. The Guardians were needed to set things right. As the implications of Emily's words sank in, her voice barely above a whisper, Emily smiled, looking more like her old self than she had in days. "Now," she said, "we learn, we adapt. We become part of something greater than ourselves." As the first rays of dawn began to pierce the dissipating storm clouds, the staff of Boston Memorial found themselves on the brink of a new era. An era where the lines between science and magic, between life and death, were not so clearly drawn. An era where miracles, they realized, were not so much divine interventions as they were glimpses into the vast, interconnected tapestry of existence. And at the center of it all stood Aura, a silent guardian, a bridge between worlds. The journey that had begun with her mysterious arrival was far from over. In fact, they were beginning to realize it was only just beginning. As the sun rose over Boston, casting a golden glow over the rain-soaked city, an uneasy calm settled over Boston Memorial Hospital. The events of the night had left everyone shaken, grappling with a reality that defied explanation. Yet, as the morning shift arrived and the business of saving lives resumed, there was an undeniable sense that everything had changed. In the hospital's largest conference room, an emergency meeting was underway. Dr. Blackwood, his usual polished appearance notably disheveled, sat at the head of the table. Around him were gathered key staff members, including Lisa, Michael, and surprisingly John, who had insisted on being present despite his still recovering condition. "Ladies and gentlemen," Dr. Blackwood began, his voice gravelly from lack of sleep, "we find ourselves in an unprecedented situation. What we witnessed last night, it challenges everything we thought we knew about medicine, about life itself." A murmur ran through the assembled staff. Many still looked shell-shocked, while others seemed almost feverish with excitement at the possibilities before them. "The question now," Dr. Blackwood continued, "is how do we proceed? Do we go public with what we've discovered? Do we attempt to study this phenomenon? Or do we try to return to business as usual and pretend none of this ever happened?" The room erupted into a cacophony of voices, each person eager to share their opinion. Some advocated for immediate disclosure, arguing that the potential benefits to mankind were too great to ignore. Others warned of panic, of accusations of fraud, of the potential collapse of the medical system as they knew it. Through it all, Lisa remained silent, her mind racing. Finally, as the arguments reached a fever pitch, she stood up, her quiet authority immediately drawing all eyes to her. "We're missing the point," she said, her voice steady. "This isn't about us. It's not about Boston Memorial or even about medicine as we know it. It's about something much bigger." She paused, gathering her thoughts. What we witnessed last night was a glimpse into the true nature of life and death. Aura and the other horses, they're not just miraculous healers. They're part of a system, a balance that exists whether we acknowledge it or not. Michael nodded, picking up her train of thought. Lisa's right. We're not dealing with a new medical breakthrough here. We're dealing with a fundamental shift in our understanding of reality. Dr. Blackwood leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "What are you suggesting, then?" It was John who answered, his voice soft but firm. "We learn, we adapt, we become stewards of this knowledge, using it to inform our practices, our ethics, our very understanding of what it means to heal." A hush fell over the room as the implications of John's words sank in. It was a daunting prospect, reimagining their entire approach to medicine and life itself. "But how?" someone asked. "How do we even begin to understand something like this?" As if in answer, there was a soft knock at the door. All heads turned to see Emily standing there, looking small, but somehow radiant in her hospital gown. Behind her, reaching out to take her father's hand, "I'm a bridge," she said, "like Aura, like all those who were chosen last night. We're here to help you understand, to guide you as you learn to see the world in a new way." As Emily spoke, a sense of purpose seemed to fill the room. The fear and uncertainty of the night before gave way to a cautious optimism, a sense of being on the brink of something momentous. "It won't be easy," Lisa warned, looking around at her colleagues. "We'll be challenging centuries of established medical doctrine. There will be resistance, skepticism, maybe even hostility." Michael nodded, a determined glint in his eye. "But we'll face it together, as a team, as a hospital, as pioneers in a new frontier of healing." Dr. Blackwood stood, his decision made. Then it settled. "We move forward, carefully and responsibly. We document everything, we conduct rigorous studies, and we prepare ourselves for the day when we can share this knowledge with the world." As the meeting adjourned, the staff of Boston Memorial filed out with a new sense of purpose. They knew the road ahead would be challenging, filled with obstacles both scientific and philosophical, but they also knew they were part of something extraordinary, something that had the potential to change the world. Outside, Aura nickered softly as Emily approached her. The young girl wrapped her arms around the horse's neck, burying her face in the silky mane. "We did it," Emily whispered. "We helped them understand." Aura's response was a gentle nuzzle, a reminder of the deep connection they now shared. As John wheeled himself over to join them, followed closely by Lisa and Michael, they formed a tableau of the new reality they were stepping into. A reality where the boundaries between science and magic, between life and death, were no longer so clearly defined. The sun climbed higher in the sky, its warm light seeming to bless this new beginning. In hospitals and homes across the city, across the world, other chosen ones were waking to their new roles, guided by their equine guardians. The balance was shifting, healing, growing stronger, and at Boston Memorial Hospital, a group of dedicated healers prepared to lead the way into this brave new world, one miracle at a time. In the months that followed the extraordinary events at Boston Memorial Hospital, the world began to change in subtle yet profound ways. News of the miraculous healings had spread, despite the hospital's best efforts to keep things under wraps. Whispers of horses appearing in times of great need, of children with otherworldly wisdom, of a new understanding of life and death began to circulate. At the heart of it all, Boston Memorial stood as a beacon of this new era. Under the guidance of Dr. Blackwood, who had embraced his role as a pioneer in this uncharted territory. The hospital had become a center for what they now called holistic life force studies. Lisa and Michael had taken lead roles in this new department, working tirelessly to bridge the gap between traditional medicine and the newfound knowledge of the life force that connected all things. Their days were filled with groundbreaking research, mind-bending discoveries, and the constant challenge of integrating this ancient wisdom with modern medical practices. John, fully recovered and more vibrant than ever, had become an invaluable liaison between the medical staff and the growing community of those touched by the equine guardians. His unique perspective as both a patient and a long-time keeper of Aura's secret made him the perfect mediator in this brave new world. And Emily? The young girl had blossomed into her role as a bridge between worlds. Her innocent wisdom and deep connection to the balance of life had made her an inspiration to many. Under the watchful eye of Aura, who had become a permanent resident of the hospital, much to the initial chagrin of the janitorial staff, Emily helped guide both patients and doctors towards a more holistic understanding of health and healing. On a warm summer evening, exactly 1 year after Aura's first appearance, the core team gathered on the hospital's rooftop garden. It had become their tradition, a moment to reflect on how far they'd come and the challenges that still lay ahead. "I still can't quite believe it sometimes," Lisa said, leaning against the railing and gazing out over the city. "A year ago, if someone had told me I'd be working with mystical horses and life force energy, I'd have thought they were crazy," Michael chuckled, shaking his head. "Tell me about it. I've had to rewrite my entire understanding of cellular biology. Turns out, there's a lot more to life than we ever imagined." "It hasn't been easy," Dr. Blackwood admitted, his face etched with the lines of many sleepless nights and intense debates with medical boards. "But I wouldn't change it for the world. What we're doing here, it's revolutionary." John nodded, watching as Emily played with Aura in a corner of the garden. "It's more than revolutionary," he said softly. "It's a return to something ancient, something we'd forgotten as a species, a remembering." As if sensing the weight of the moment, Emily and Aura joined the group. The young girl's eyes sparkled with an ageless wisdom as she looked up at the adults. "It's only the beginning, you know," she said, her voice carrying that strange mix of childish innocence and profound understanding. "There's so much more to learn, so much more to remember." Aura nickered softly in agreement, her presence a constant reminder of the mysteries that still lay ahead. "What do you think the future holds?" Lisa asked, directing her question to all of them, but especially to Emily. The young girl was quiet for a moment, her hand resting on Aura's neck. When she spoke, her words seemed to echo with the weight of eternity. I think we're going to remember what it truly means to be alive, not just as individuals, but as part of something greater. We're going to rediscover our connection to each other, to the earth, to the universe itself." She paused, a small smile playing at her lips. "And in doing so, we're going to redefine what it means to heal. It won't just be about curing diseases anymore. It'll be about nurturing the spark of life in all its forms, about maintaining the great balance." As Emily's words hung in the air, a sense of awe and purpose settled over the group. They stood there, bathed in the golden light of the setting sun, each lost in thought about the role they would play in this grand awakening. Aura's soft whinny broke the silence, drawing their attention to the horizon. There, barely visible against the darkening sky, were the silhouettes of other horses, running free across the distant hills, a reminder that they were not alone in this journey, that across the world, others were awakening to this new reality. "Well," Dr. Blackwood said, straightening his lab coat with a smile, "I'd say we have our work cut out for us." Lisa laughed, feeling a surge of excitement despite the enormity of the task ahead. "That's an understatement if I ever heard one." "But we're ready," Michael added, his voice firm with conviction. "We've been given a gift, a chance to make a real difference in the world." John pulled Emily close, ruffling her hair affectionately. "And we have the best guides we could ask for," he said, nodding towards his daughter and Aura. As the stars began to twinkle in the deepening twilight, the group stood together, united in their commitment to this new path. They knew the road ahead would be challenging, filled with obstacles both expected and unimaginable. But they also knew that they were part of something greater than themselves, something that had the potential to heal not just individual patients, but the very fabric of life itself. In that moment, on a rooftop garden in Boston, with a mystical horse and a wise beyond her years child in their midst, they felt the pulse of the universe. It beat in their hearts, in the air around them, in the very ground beneath their feet. It was the rhythm of life, of death, of rebirth and renewal, and they were learning, step by step, to dance to its eternal song. As they turned to head back inside, ready to face whatever challenges the new day might bring, Emily's voice drifted on the evening breeze, a promise and a reminder of the miraculous journey they had embarked upon. "Remember," she said, her eyes shining with the light of countless stars, "every ending is just a new beginning. And in the great dance of the universe, we are all both students and teachers, healers and healed." Aura's gentle nicker seemed to affirm Emily's words, a sound that resonated with the very essence of life itself. And as they walked back into the hospital, each member of this extraordinary team knew that they were not just changing the face of medicine, they were helping to write a new chapter in the story of humanity itself. In hospitals and homes around the world, other chosen ones were embarking on similar journeys of discovery and healing. The balance was shifting, growing stronger with each passing day, and at the heart of it all, a young girl, a mystical horse, and a dedicated team of healers led the way into a future bright with the promise of miracles yet to come.